Again, thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Anthony from Anthony's Creative Classroom, and I am located 25 miles west of Cleveland, Ohio. So tonight we're going to play with Velum, and I'm going to share with you some ways I use it to make cards. And we're going to use some stamps from several different companies and a bunch of different kinds of ink and some embellishments. And I hope what I'm going to share with you is either new to you or just a refresher. So I'm going to move the board out of the way and we are going to get started. So I've made 4 card samples. I'm going to show you how I made these and a couple other techniques about how I attach vellum to my cards so that you don't see the adhesive. So let me clear some of this out of the way, and then we're going to do some card making tonight. And just let me share some of the stamps I have and the products I'm using. Got some VersaFine Clair pads. If you're doing ink blending, pretty much no matter what line of inks, if they have a blending quality, a pink, a yellow, and some shade of blue or teal, think of it as the ink in your inkjet printer. You know, we have the cyan, the yellow, and the magenta. So any shades of those kind of colors will work. The VersaFine pads blend so nice. I actually like the blending with these because the color is intense even more than using a distress ink. So we're going to move these out of the way. And when we do that blending, we're going to use this style brush. I refer to them as a spoon brush. I don't know what else anybody else refers to them as. And then we're going to do some stamping with the VersaFine Clair, but Nocturne. But most of our stamping tonight is going to be with the Distress Ink Picket Fence. And I'm using it because it's the only white ink I have other than a Recollections pad. And this is just a nicer pad for what we're doing. Alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and I'll set that over here. And I took it out of the jar and I put it into a little Tupperware thing with a coffee filter, and then when I'm done I can pour it back into the bottle. So that's how I work with my embossing. And I don't know where, somewhere on Amazon I got these little triangles that are a little scoop, so that works really well with it. And the powder doesn't stick that much to the scoop. We're going to use some gold cord on one of the cards and a couple of embossing folders. I have a little paintbrush for wiping embossing powder where I don't want it, and some Copic markers. You can use any brand of alcohol markers you want, but those are the ones I'm going to use tonight. And we are going to use a stamp from Spellbinders. I don't know if it's still available, but I put the stamp number in the comments for you. Spellbinders is now part of Spellbinders, but it's really a nice stamp to work with, to use on vellum, to color with, because it's got some openings and some details. So if the stamp's not available, you at least will see how I use it. And I'm also going to be using a background stamp from Brass and Bliss, which is called Splatter Background, and I use that on this card as well on the layer under the vellum, and I'll explain all of that as we go through it. The other stamp set we're using tonight is from Include a Thank You, and this is the set is called a Tangled Flourish. You've seen me use some of Desiree's stamps before, and we're going to use this stamp set. I'm going to use some of the greetings, and we're going to use this stamp right here to make this particular card. So, and I embossed it, fussy cut it, and colored from behind with the alcohol markers. So, that's some of what we're doing tonight. I know that the Brass and Bliss stamp and the include a thank you stamp set is still available. You might find the Stampendous one on Spellbinders site, or you might find it on Amazon. When I went to stampendous.com, it took me right to Amazon. So this stamp might still be available on Amazon. We are going to get started, and the first card we're going to start with is going to be this Thinking of You card. We hold it on an angle. You can see where I've ran the vellum through the embossing folder, and this also is a shimmer vellum, and I wish you could see it better, but I'm just trying to figure out here. If I hold it like this, you can see the pattern in it. Hit focus real quick, see if I can focus on that. There. So you can see the flower pattern in the background from the embossing folder. And one of the tricks I want to show you, if you've tried embossing with vellum or even acetate, sometimes it will crack. And we don't want it to crack. So what we're going to do when we run the piece of vellum through the folder, wrong vellum, I need the shimmer vellum. We're going to run it through a folder along with a piece of 80-pound cardstock. It will support the vellum so the vellum doesn't crack. So let me grab my Big Shot. So I have my sandwich, and if you don't have a Big Shot, use whatever sandwich that you're supposed to use with an embossing folder. And I'm going to put my embossing folder in my Big Shot. Let me refocus that. Put the plate on, and I'm going to run it through. So one of the added benefits of using the vellum with the Big Shot is that you have that extra piece of cardstock that's in there. So in addition to your vellum piece that's embossed, you have a white piece of cardstock that's already embossed as well. So you can just put this in your stash of backgrounds, and when you need an embossed background, it's already done because we had to do it for the vellum one. So let me grab my card kit for this card. And I'm going to take this piece out because we've already used it. And let me pull the card sample in here. And what I did with this is I put this vellum on, because I needed to stabilize it, I attached it to a piece of white cardstock. So I need to trim that down to fit on my card. Grab a trimmer, and I want to cut this down to 4 1/4 by, or 4 by 5 1/4. And then I also need to cut my extra piece of cardstock down to the same size. And I apologize for the noise the trimmer makes. The vellum is 29 pounds, and it's 8.5 by 11, and I buy my vellum from Michael's because it's hard to find this weight vellum. It's a nice weight vellum. If you remember when we made, I pulled them out just in case I might use them later, when we made the flowers a couple videos ago, and we made them with the vellum with the water. This is the weight vellum you want, that when you wet it, it's going to curl on its own. So you don't even need to heat this vellum. If it's the heavier weight, like cardstock vellum, you need to heat it to get it to curl. But I just bought this today at Michael's, and it was $7.99 for 40 sheets, which I don't think is too bad. So to attach my vellum, I'm using a very tiny thin line of liquid glue around the perimeter of my card. And because it's pearlized vellum, it doesn't show like the clear or the white vellum. And it's just a little tiny line of it. So I'm just going to line that up on the paper and give it a nice press to attach it. And then I'm just going to come around. And I want to make sure I don't put a lot of pressure on it because I don't want it to slide, because the glue will make it slide just a little bit. We're just going to let that dry for a second, and I have one more thing I want to add to my card, which is this strip of black paper, and I'm going to use ScorTape for that. Let me get some ScorTape on here. And I typically, when I'm going to use my ScorTape, I just grab a clear block to tear it so I don't have to deal with, put it down, pick up the scissors, and all of that. So I'm going to take this off and set it on my card. And just trim off the excess with my scissors. So, and the little strip is just a scrap from cutting down cardstock. I didn't cut an whole extra piece to get this little strip. So the other thing I want to do while we have it all out is I'm going to grab a stamping block, and I'm going to take the Thinking of You stamp out of here. Actually, we're just gonna, since I already made a Thinking of You card, I'm going to use the Just Because stamp from the stamp from Include a Thank You, so that I have a different card in my stash. I'm going to stamp it with Diversifying Clair. We're going to let that dry for a second. And the other thing we're going to use tonight is one of the images from one of my stamp sets from Anthony's Papercraft. And I'm going to do some quick coloring on here with some Copic markers. And unfortunately, this stamp is no longer available, but I had the images already die cut left over from a class kit, and they were cut on my Scan and Cut, and I already have the background layer, so that's why we're using one of these tonight. So I'm going to just do some quick coloring here with some alcohol markers. And where the shading is built in, this is a good tip for you for any of the stamps you have. If the artist has put shading in their stamp, that's where you're going to do your shading to add highlights to the image. So, and I did that to all of my stamps, so that you don't have to figure out where to add the extra color. It's already built into the stamps. We're just going to do some quick coloring here. Here. And that's all there is to color in that. So that's done. So I'm just going to take my glue, and we're going to glue this to the extra layer of the black. Cloth here. I use my stamp cleaning rag when I'm gluing, because I can just press down and it blots up any overflowing glue out from underneath. So And the way I cut out inside the handle was I just took my hole punch and punched a few holes and then took my scissors and fussy cut out the opening. On this card, the original card, I just colored it in black. So you can do it either way. And then we're going to add some pop dots to this. Grab a couple little ones and put them in a smaller area over here. So that piece is done. And then I'm going to use my ScorTape. Actually, I don't need to use my ScorTape. I can use just my glue for this. And I hope all that was in the frame because I wasn't looking up. That down, and then we're going to glue this to our card base. And when I'm doing things with pattern paper or specialty paper, instead of doing the normal, like we would cut things 1/4 of an inch smaller to make our layers to create our borders, I go with 1/8 of an inch so I get more of the specialty paper or the pattern paper. You can see on here where the flowers are. So we're going to take our watering can and we're going to attach that to our card. And I didn't look. I hope I put this card on the right way so it doesn't open backwards. And if it does open backwards, somebody's just going to get a card in the mail that opens backwards. Tips on lining up the card to the base. I typically use the glue because it gives me wiggle room. And I will typically start out on 3 sides. And if it's balanced here and I've done my cutting at the right spacing, usually the extra side comes out. But with the glue, you have a little wiggle room to line things up. So that's on my card. And now I am just going to use my scissors to cut around my greeting. And if it's not completely even, I don't care. I have a very good friend named Desiree who you've heard me talk about very often. We are not Hallmark. So that is my favorite line she has ever said. We are not Hallmark. So I'm going to take my glue, add some glue to my greeting strip, put it down on my paper, and take my scissors and cut around it again. And I typically don't use long scissors unless I'm doing something like this. And I don't use them, so my long scissors came from the Dollar Tree because I didn't need to spend a lot of money on a pair of scissors I don't use all the time. So. And I do prefer the pop dots that are black versus the white because you can't see them. Even if I'm doing something really light, you can't see them. Okay, so there's that. So pretty much we're on track with the same card, just different greeting. And what I'm going to do in the center of all of the flowers, I'm going to lift this up. Hopefully it will pick it up. if I go on an angle, you can see in the middle of all the flowers I put gems. And I just use the cheap self-adhesive gems. I am not spending money on Swarovski crystals to put on a card that I'm going to put in the mail. And my favorite tool for applying gems is my X-Acto knife. So I'm just going to go in here and pop them off of the little bit of acetate. And they're cut into these little strips because they came out of a class kit that I did not use. Here. So it's just a quick, easy card. I mean, like maybe 15 minutes, including digging out the big shot. So that's the first card I have for you tonight. And it is embossing on Shimmer Vellum. I used one of my pre-printed images that were run through my scan and cut. You could use anything you wanted. You could use a punch and punch out a flower or a die with a flower. And this was just colored on regular cardstock with alcohol markers. The stamp, again, was from a Tangled Flourish, where I used the greetings from it. We will be using some of the other greetings and one of the stamps out of it in a card we're going to make tonight. But I wanted to start out with something simple, something fast. So we are going to do some heat embossing next. So I need to get my little Misty out. And because the stamp is a foam rubber stamp, I don't need the black matte in my Misty. I need to find it though, because I will need it for the other card I do. So I am going to pull out that card kit, and we are going to make the card with the sunflower next. This kit. Okay. So, and if you are wondering what the piece of tape is for on the Misty lid, I had somebody demoing for me at a show, and he kept putting the tape on, washi tape on the top of the Misty, and ooh, let me break a magnet tonight. And I kept taking it back off thinking, why is this tape on here? It gives you a little handle to open the Misty. So smart. I'm going to put my piece of vellum in, and I'm going to put a magnet there and a magnet there, and you know what? I didn't clean the stamp, and I need to clean the stamp real quick so I don't get white ink where I don't want it. And I will clean them if I've used pigment ink or Versamark on them, because Versamark will leave a weird coating. I also, because I'm using vellum, see, I did get some ink on it. So I'm going to turn that over. Let's grab another piece of vellum, because that one got white ink on it from this stamp. So we're going to put the magnets back down. I also, and I normally don't use one of these embossing bags, but I do on vellum so that embossing powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to go. If I'm just using cardstock, I typically won't use that. So put this in here. That magnet. Stamp. Pick up the stamp. Okay, so I'm going to grab my white ink, And again, I'm using distressed picket fence. Ooh, let me get in line, get in the screen. And I usually, with this ink, I have to stamp twice. Okay, make sure my lid's on my ink pad. Open this up, take my vellum out. And grab my embossing powder, and again, I'm using the embossing powder from Brutus Monroe called Alabaster. It's a beautiful, very fine, detailed white powder. And I would take my little brush and brush off some extra powder where I don't want it. Get that out of the way, and I'm going to grab the heat gun. Sorry for the noise. So, and I'm going to heat my vellum from below. And you have to remember not to get too close, because vellum will burn very easily. And I'm just going to give it a quick check and make sure it's all melted. A little bit over the top. And turn off the heat gun, and we're going to let that cool for just a minute. And I have found it's easier for me to color with the alcohol markers after I've embossed if I put a piece of black paper underneath what I'm doing. So I'm going to grab some Copic markers, and what's nice about coloring with the vellum, with the markers, I don't have to do detail coloring. I can color right over all this parts in the middle of the stamped image. Put that on an angle so you can see better. So all these spots right here where there's embossing powder, I can color right over that. It's not going to see it. So I don't need to be real detail oriented with my coloring. I will tell you, because of the vellum, I do a couple layers of each color, but I'm just coloring right inside the outline. Let me zoom in a little bit more while I'm coloring up on the screen. So I'm just coloring right back over again, because the nature of an alcohol marker is the more layers of the same color you put down, the darker it's going to get. So like I said, I don't need to worry about just getting these little details. I can just color right over the whole thing. And you want to let it dry in between adding extra layers. I mean, and it evaporates pretty quickly. And there you can see the color from the front, from coloring from behind. Okay. So we're going to start building the flower part from the inside. And I love this technique because I can just scribble color, and I scribble color the best. So I'm going to come in and just add some yellow. Sunflowers have to be the easiest flower to color. You can see how fast I'm coloring. Now I've gone all the way around, so I'm just going to do another layer of yellow. So I find it much easier to twist my paper as I'm coloring than to come back and, you know, move my arm and contort. So. Okay, so there's my yellow. I'm going to come in with my goldish color, and I'm going to just color over these white blotches because there are some openings in those that I want the color to come through. And when you color the white blotches, you really need to lay down the color pretty heavily. So we're going to add another layer of this orange and yellow. And then I'm going to take my regular orange and I'm going to add just a little bit of highlights onto my yellow. And I'm kind of focusing where the embossing powder is, but we were talking about the shading before in a black stamped image, and I'm just hitting that with this. I'm going to add a little bit more orange, darker orange on top of my other orange because I think it's just a little too light. So from the back we have a hot mess. From the front we have a nice card, and it shows up, you can see what it looks like on the black, but once you put it on the white, it really shows up the color. So, very. Okay, so we're going to get that out of the way. I'm going to move this sample card over here. And I need the big, we're done with alcohol markers for now. So I want to grab the bigger stamp positioner. And I need, because of the size of this stamp and needing to be able to use the magnets to hold it down, I'm using a full-size sheet of paper, and then I will cut it down. Over, and again I'm going to use the VersaFine Clair Nocturne to ink up this stamp. Zoom out so I'm back in the picture. And I'm going to come back with a stamp press. Okay, a couple spots where I didn't get it, so I'm going to use both hands and press. Okay. Add a little bit more ink to that end. And stamp it again. There we go. So, great background stamp. You could stamp this with Versamark or another color and use clear or white embossing powder on it, and then use blending brushes and ink this piece of paper, and you'll get a resist for the dots. So this would be good if you're trying to do a solar system kind of sky, solar system background, because if this is done in, the dots are done with white, it's going to resist the ink, so you'll have all this texture will all be white. Just another idea of how to use the stamp. And we're going to set this over here because I believe we're done with it. And I need to trim this piece down. trimmer. So I need a piece that is 5 inches by 3 3/4. So this other part that has some inking on it, I can cut into little strips and use them on something else. So we might use these on something else tonight. I'll just cut that down and set it off to the side. Part of what I wanted to show you tonight are different ways of attaching your vellum so you don't see the adhesive. So what we're going to do with this one, we're going to use 1/8 inch ScorTape, and I'm going to zoom back in, refocus, and I'm going to take the panel that I just stamped and turn it upside down, and I'm going to put ScorTape around the perimeter as close to the edges as I can get. Come out one. Okay, so you can see I've got my tape around the perimeter of my card. So I'm going to take my stamped image and I'm just going to put one little dot of glue right in the center. Okay, little tiny dot. See that white dot right in the middle? That's all the glue I need. And I just need it to hold it for just a brief second. So we're going to put this down over top, and I'm going to tap that down. And I am going to take, I missed a step, hold on. Hold that for a minute so it holds. I'm going to take my smallest ball stylus I can and just press into the vellum around the perimeter of the cardstock. And I'm going to take my scissors and angle cut off each corner of the vellum. So now, the reason we do the scoring, it helps fold the vellum, and we're going to attach the vellum to that ScorTape we put around the perimeter of the card. And that's how we're going to attach our vellum to our card without anybody seeing the adhesive. So now we're attached and there's no glue around the edge. So the glue doesn't show up. And it's going to be loose. This would be another good way to make a little shaker card attached from the back. So what I want to do is I want to take a couple pieces of blue tape. Don't need a lot, just a little piece. And I am going to take my gold cord, wherever I put it, and I want to wrap some cord around my card. So I'm going to figure out where I want it to start. You know, I did a cross on the other one. We're going to do vertical on this one. Plus my flower's a little off center, So that helps, that's another way to recenter everything. So I'm going to put my cord, tape my cord down, and I'm just going to wrap it around a few times just to get the length I want, and then I'll come back and adjust it. I'll take the cord off, and now I'm going to, as I wrap the cord, I'm going to line the cord up on itself so it doesn't have a bunch of gaps in it. So if you ever were making a card and you don't get something lined up in the center, just put something down and fill in the difference from where you were. And it's just an easy way to recenter something because it tricks your eye that this is where I have to be centered now instead of the whole card. Okay, so now I'm going to attach this to my card with some ScorTape, and I'm going to use the wider ScorTape. And the reason I want to use ScorTape for this versus using liquid glue or just a tape runner is because I've got a little warping going on here from wrapping the vellum around the whole card. So it will help the card lay flat. And I'm peeling up the corners so I can put some extra tape over top of the cord. And then I'm going to put a strip down the middle. And I'm going to take my fingernail and burnish all this ScorTape down. And it's going to attach to the piece of black. So the way I center my ScorTape is I will take one edge and create a little tail. Somebody asked earlier about centering cardstock. So this is where I would look at the three sides and see if I'm close enough. Sorry about my head. And then I'm going to come down and press this other side that has the little tail and pull out the rest of the tape. And then I will flip it over and tape the rest of it down. There. And that makes my card flat again because I put the ScorTape around and down the center. And then I'm going to put ScorTape on here again because I want to attach it to this piece of gold mirrored cardstock. And then just come back and peel off the rest of my ScorTape and press that down. So that's how I got to this step of the card. The coloring from behind and using the background stamp from Brass and Bliss for the speckles. So you can see that underneath the vellum, but it's more subtle. It's not right up in your face like if you just stamped and put something down right over top of this. So, and then I'm going to use my liquid glue to attach this to my card base. because I've got enough meat going on here that I can glue this to my card base. And this mirrored cardstock is pretty thick, so it's not going to warp that much. I'll get some glue on the back of that. And this is going to line up completely to cover my whole card front. So my card is going to be gold and no white at all on my card. And I can just flip that over and press it down. And I'm just going to use the same greeting stamp because it's what's on the block. Okay, give that a second to dry. And grab my scissors. And just cut around it. I got a little scrap of black here somewhere that I was using. Grab some glue. Glue on my little strip. Attach it to my black and just cut around it with my scissors. Again, if it's not all perfectly lined up, we are not Hallmark. So, and I'm going to use some glue on this. I'm not going to pop this one up because I want the whole card flat. And I'm going to attach the just because down at the bottom. And you just have to watch because of this vellum and the embossing powder, it will want to slide. So there is card number 2 tonight. So the original card did not have a greeting on it. And I put the cord horizontal because I got my image centered. On here, when I attached the vellum to the white cardstock, I didn't have it centered. So to make the spacing on the outside of the flower balance, that's why I put the cord vertically. So now if you would just look at this card like this, it's in the center. This filled in the gap of the cord. You could do that with a strip of paper. You could do that with anything you want. But I just had the cord handy today, so I grabbed the cord. I clean this stamp and get it off of here. I clean both of these stamps actually. One will go back in the package. And while I'm in here, I'm going to grab the dream stamp because I'm going to want that dream stamp next. Just stick that on the block. And I need this other stamp out of this set. And because I'm using a photopolymer stamp, I need to put the foam mat back in my MISTI. So that's, oh, there's those magnets again. And you have to watch with your magnets because I have broken magnets when they snap together. So here's my other tip for your magnets. I use washi tape on them. And I put my magnet on the washi tape, that, and then I take the rest of the washi tape and I fold it up to enclose that magnet in the washi tape. That does two things. It helps me be able to pull the magnets apart. It also helps me pick them up off of my mat. Stick the other one down. Roll the tape around it. And fold that over. And because this is wider tape, I will trim some of it off. And then it's a little, when it's not, the tape isn't as wide, it's easier to position it in your stamp positioner. So now if they stick together, I can just pull them apart instead of trying to dig them apart. So there's my extra little tip for the night. So the next card I'm going to do, we're going to do some heat embossing and coloring from the back again. So if you missed that on the first card, you'll see that technique again. But then they're also fussy cut out to attach to the card. So I'm going to do some stamping with that. I will also stamp and emboss the word dream on a piece of black cardstock. Let me get that over here. I'll need that. Oh, I already have it. The other thing I would mention that I did was I did some die cutting. So I did some die cutting to some white cardstock, and I took 2 Spellbinders Nestabilities, and I taped the first 2 sizes together and got them as even as I could. Okay, grab a piece of black paper so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. So I have the 2 Nestabilities, and you can do this no matter what shape you have. So I used the 2 Nestabilities taped together with washi tape to make a frame. Then I untaped them and I cut myself a solid piece of the largest size. And I don't know if you can see that. Maybe if I hold it this way, you can see the dots on it. I ran it through the Swiss Dots embossing folder. So my solid piece has been embossed. So it's got some texture to it. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take the frame and attach it to my background, which I did here in this card. And unfortunately, it doesn't really show up that well. So trust me when I tell you it's there. So that would be attached to that. So I'm going to do that real quick with some glue. I'm going to flip that over and give that a press because I keep loosening it up and sliding it around. So that's we're going to set that off to the side to dry for a minute. I'm going to attach my black panel to my A7 card base, and if you're not sure A7, it's 5x7 when it's folded. So again, I'm looking top side and bottom, see if I'm lined up, and then that pretty much gets me lined up all 4 sides. Okay. Then this piece is going to get pop dots on it. So now you can really see my cards aren't moving, and most times I would add even more to this. But because I'm doing a live tonight, I need to save some time. And then I'm just going to center this on my card and press that down. Okay, so now I have the base of my card done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp my greeting with the white ink. And with greetings, I don't use the stamp positioner because usually the paper is too small. So I'm just taking my time applying ink to my stamp. I'm going to stamp it down. Hold it for a second for the ink to transfer. And then I'm going to throw a little bit of white powder on here, and then we'll heat it when we heat everything else. And I'm just brushing off the excess embossing powder. So I have my word stamped and embossed. I mean the embossing powder on it. Knocked all that embossing powder right off when I thumped that card. So now you get to see me do again what I did out of the view of the camera. Okay, I'm going to set that over there. I'm not going to thump it again. So what I need to do, and I'll clean that later, is I need to stamp 3 of these images. And where's my magnet? I can't, on my table, I've lost one of my magnets. Go figure. Take my embossing bag and get the stamp. And press the stamp. And I'm going to stamp it a second time. Nope, not under the Misty. Good guess. It's here somewhere. Who knows? Okay. So then I'm going to flip this around, put my magnet down, rub this half with my little embossing bag, and stamp the stamp again. And I can get away with not embossing putting powder on the first one right away because the vellum is not going to absorb the ink. So we'll set that over there. I'll grab my embossing powder and I'm going to add powder to these. So those have powder on them. I'm not going to do the third one tonight because I don't want to be here all night, you guys, watching me heat emboss. But I want people who came late to see the coloring part of it. So again, this is the card we're working on. We emboss my dream. And another thing you can do when you're embossing is, while it's hot, you can throw powder on it again to make it a little bit darker. And emboss it a second time. So especially if you're embossing on black paper, you can just dunk it in the powder again and heat it again. So give me a second to heat these real quick, and then we'll do some coloring. Okay. The other thing I want to let you know about embossing vellum is let your heat gun heat up before you go to the vellum. It will allow it to heat better without warping the vellum as much. So we're going to let these cool off for a second. And then I'm going to grab my piece of black paper again so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. And we're going to color from behind. And I'm going to color these with my Tri-Blend markers. Tri-Blend marker is an alcohol marker, and it has 3 shades of the same color, light, medium, and dark. So it helps you when you're shading and other things. So I'm going to start with the light, and I'm just going to color. And I'm going to switch to the medium. And then move on to the dark. And I need a black for this. Okay, so that's how fast it is to color one of these. So if you missed me earlier, you can color. You're going to heat emboss the vellum from stamp and embossing powder from the front, then you're going to color from the back. So, and once it's on the white paper, the color really shows up. And then you can see on this card I did all 3 of this shape, and when I cut them out I cut the little white tails hanging off the outsides. I just cut those off because that was too hard to cut around. So I just cut around the main image and cut all of these little like butterfly antennas off. And I did that to all three. You can see. And then when I attached it, I just used little dots of glue, and I put the glue under the black or under the dark to attach it to my frame that's on this card. So I'm not going to color all three of these panels, but you can see how nice that shows up on the card when I tilt it in the light. So that's how I made this card. And then I just took my scissors and I fussy cut around the word dream and popped it up. I didn't mount it on another layer of paper because it was going right over the white. So. And then I had a butterfly sticker out of my stash that I added some glue to hold it down. So all of this stuff is attached to this white part that's raised up. Kind of see the layer a little bit. So that is how I made this card. But there's a lot of steps to it, but I didn't want to take the time to do all those steps for you tonight because I have one more quick thing I want to show you. I need to grab my big shot again. And this is another repeat from earlier as well. I'm going to take and I'm going to emboss a piece of vellum. And I want a piece of vellum, and I also want a piece of cardstock because using the cardstock will help the vellum not crack in the embossing folder. So I've got my layer of cardstock and my vellum. Just going to line those up and put them in the embossing folder and run it through just like I normally would run an embossing folder through to a piece of cardstock. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. And I was going to pre-emboss everything, but then you wouldn't see what everything I'm doing. So I have my piece of vellum embossed, and you can really see how that shows up on this embossing folder with the swirl. But I also have an embossed piece of cardstock that I can just put in my stash so I don't have to emboss a piece of cardstock later. So I need a sheet of scrap paper real quick, so let me grab that. And vellum takes ink very, very well. It doesn't, not a lot of work to do it. I am going to trim this down before I color it for my card. Grab my trimmer again. And when I started out with a quarter sheet of vellum. So I'm going to cut this down because of my layering on this card to 3 3/4 by 5. And the way it went through the embossing folder, I need to do a small trim from all 4 sides. I've got my vellum. I think you can see it on camera. I am going to use some VersaFine Clair ink pads. And some blending brushes that look like a spoon. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the ink right on the vellum, but we're working on the back side of the vellum. So we're on the smooth side. So I'm going to start out with the purple, pick up some ink, and I'm just going to start blending. And because VersaFine has some pigment in it, it stays wet a little longer and it allows it to mix with the other color. And once I get some on it, because it's not going to dry, I come back and I smooth it out with my brush. And that just helps pull some of that excess ink off the paper. So now I'm going to work from I work from both ends first. So I'm going to do the same thing from the other end with the turquoise color. And then I'm going to take and, try and wipe off a lot of the ink. So now I have my two ends done. And we're going to come in the middle with the yellow. And it's a weird yellow. I mean, it's not the pad that I got green in it, it's just the color of the yellow. It's called Golden Meadow, so it's like a greenish yellow. Pick up some ink. I want to make sure I'm still on the back, and I'm going to come in the middle and add my yellow. Get a nice layer of the yellow down, and then I'm going to come in and lightly go over my turquoise and lightly over the purple, and then because the ink stays wet long enough, I'm getting all these colors mixing. So I'm going to take my brush, there's probably still some ink left on it, and just blend that green into the blue, and the same thing with the purple into the orange. Just go back and forth across. It's that easy to color vellum with an ink pad and a brush. Less than 2 minutes to color that. Now because it is vellum, I'm going to heat it real quick just to dry the rest of that ink. And you want to keep the heat gun moving so that it cuts down on the warping. Okay, so now I've got this, and I'm going to attach it to my piece of white. And then my white will attach to my cardstock. My black will attach to my white card, and this is going to go on top. But the way I'm going to attach this is I'm going to use a pokey tool, and we're going to use some brads to attach this together. So a long time ago, Stampin' Up! Made this great tool for paper piercing, and I have hoarded it forever. I don't know even what it's called. Oh, let's see. And it's for spacing eyelets and everything else. So it comes with an extra little mat. I will see if I can find it somewhere. You might find it on eBay or something, or in a garage sale or something, but it perfectly lines up for me to make the holes in my corner. And I just rotate it around. If you have like the long Tim Holtz ruler, it has piercing holes in it, the long clear one, so you could use the ruler also. Because you could just use your pokey tool or a push pin to go right through that. So then I'm just going to line my paper up and push the brads through the holes. And I hope I had all of that in frame because I didn't look up. I apologize. Okay, so then I have my brads in each corner. That's holding my vellum to my cardstock without any adhesive. And I'm going to take the legs on the brads and put them down. And I don't put them down all the way. And I turn it to wherever it's going to fit and not hang off the paper. Ouch. And then I take my acrylic block and I press down to flatten out the brad all the way to the paper. And then I would use my ScorTape to attach it to the black and then to attach to the card base. And then you can put whatever you want on it, stickers, words, ribbon, however you want to decorate it. And no two are going to be exactly the same. And I used these three colors. That's how I applied the ink to the back of the vellum using the brushes. Let's get this out of the way. Your vellum to your card. So again, these are the cards we made and the ideas I shared with you. Again, running the vellum through the embossing folder. This was the Shimmer vellum, which I got from the paper cut. My regular vellum I got from Michael's. My mirrored cardstock also came from the paper cut. And the stamp sets again we used are, the first one is from Include a Thank You, and it's called a Tangled Flourish. We used the Splatter Background from Brass and Bliss, and then we used the Sunflower from Spellbinders. So experiment, play, try different things, and see where you end up. So please join me next week on Wednesday. Again, thanks for joining me tonight, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.